Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Fairley. I am a Youth Opportunity Coordinator for the city of Charlottesville, and I will be your panel moderator for today. Thank you all for watching the Reunited States, which was a film inside of the 33rd Annual Virginia Film Festival. I'm here with our lovely panelists. We have great people all around. We have Ben Rekhi, who's the director of the film. We have Mark Gerzon, who is the author of the book, The Reunited States, that inspired the film. We have Susan Bro, who is the mother of Heather Heyer, as well as a co-founder of the Heather Heyer Foundation. We have Steven Olikara, who is the founder and president of the Millennial Action Project. And we have the founders of the Undivided Nation, Erin and David Leaverton. Thank you all for joining us. So, my first question actually goes to Mark. So I wanted to ask you about your book, which is entitled the same as the film that we just watched. So your book, The Reunited States, was the inspiration for this movie. So tell us about your inspiration for the book and kind of the process of taking that book and the inspiration that came with that and transitioning it into a visual medium.
I'd be glad to do that. And thank you, Daniel. I wrote the book because it was very clear to me in 2014, 2015 that we were headed for what was the worst election in our history. And it was. We may say the same thing about this year's. But I was just struck by how bad it was going to be. And I said, we've got to gather the forces of those who are really trying to bridge the divide. And I've been doing that work, Daniel, for probably 30 years, going back to the Cold War. And at the end of the Cold War, which your generation has heard about, but not really experienced, there was a lot of hatred going towards the Soviet Union. And it became clear to me when the Cold War ended that hatred was going to go somewhere. And it seems like it's turned inward. It seems like it's turned inward. And we've become a divided nation rather than an undivided nation, like my T-shirt says, which is part of the Leaverton's project. So I think for me, the book was like my way of saying, let's gather the voices of all those who are trying to bridge the divide. And I can't take any credit for translating it into the visual medium because I was approached by Ben Rekhi, who you're about to talk to, and the director of the film. And he's the one who had the vision for a film about that. I'd been dreaming of that film for a long time because the people you're going to meet, like Steven Olikara and the Leavertons and Susan Bro and others, they're all part of a movement that I'm excited to be part of. But it's hard for the movement to recognize itself because if you're a Democrat, you know who your boss is. If you're a Republican, you know who your boss is. But if you're part of this movement about bridging divides, there is no boss. We're all speaking for ourselves. We're all holding our own truth. And we're coming together in a looser and more organic and more collaborative way. And that's the beautiful thing about the film that Ben has made, that Ben has captured that feeling that there's not just the five main characters. There's dozens of hundreds, thousands of people out there who are actually singing the same song. But to get a sense of how we translate it to a visual medium, I would ask the director, Ben Rekhi, who did an extraordinary job.
Absolutely. I mean, you found my next question. So Ben, please talk to us about the film. How did it come, and what about Mark's book kind of spoke to you and said, this needs to be a film?
Well, yeah, thanks so much, Daniel and Mark. And to everyone who's watching this, I imagine that people have tuned in to watch the film and even the Q&A just because these divisions are so deeply personal for everyone. We all have lost, friends and colleagues and family members through these political divisions where we just don't talk to each other anymore. And so much of the news that we see, it impacts us very emotionally and passionately. And so thank you so much for tuning in. And those issues are what drove me to this topic as well. About 3 years ago, I had first had the idea of, after the election, trying to figure out how filmmaking and storytelling could be part of the solution. Media has been used to divide us, but it can also be part of what brings us back together. It's still the fastest way into people's hearts and minds. And often to change minds, you first have to move hearts. And so I had come up with this idea initially after seeing Susan speak at an event in DC, and after obviously the events in Charlottesville, which are so deeply personal, especially for people in Virginia and who are watching this. It was a traumatic event, and I was just struck by the way that Susan was able to come out of that with a very clear message of we need to have difficult conversations. And if we're going to prevent further violence from happening, we have to talk through these differences. And it really struck me as something profound and yet simple that very few people were saying at the time. You know, most people have been shouting past each other. And so I approached her afterwards and I said, I would love to be a part of telling your story. And I think there's parts of your story that might not be being told. And she said, I'm glad you said that. Like, a lot of the time, the media, when they interview me, I will talk about the issues that, you know, my daughter stood up for, but they're often edited out, and the people I talk about are edited out, and they just want to see me cry about my daughter, and they're missing the broader message. And I said, well, that's the story. Like, let's you know, follow that. And so we started filming, and that led me to Mark in the next step, which was coming up with this title, The Reunited States. It was, you know, something that I sort of came to me and I said, this is too good. Someone else already has this. And someone did. And it was Mark. And you know, when I found his book online after Googling it, I called him and I met with him, and he was like, I've been waiting for a filmmaker. I think there's an Inconvenient Truth level film on this topic, because people don't know that there's a transpartisan movement. All you hear about is, you know, stuff on the left and stuff on the right, but there's a massive movement, especially that Mark is at the forefront of over the last several decades. And so, you know, we started working together, and you know, anytime I was looking for a storyline, I was like, I want to, you know, talk about how the youth can make a difference. He was like, you have to talk to Steven Olikara. I want to talk, you know, film someone on an election night. This was during the midterms. He said, you should follow this independent Greg Orman. And he also introduced me to Dave and Erin. And so, you know, that collaboration is what brought the film to life. And we're just hopeful that it can give people some agency, that we all have a role in repairing the country and reuniting the country. So we're excited to, you know, talk about it further with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's pretty interesting to see that it was almost two ideas that were happening in parallel, and then being able to find each other, right? As opposed to one influencing the other. That's incredible to see. So for Erin and David, welcome to Charlottesville. It's fun here.
We lived there for about a year and a half. We love Charlottesville.
Awesome. So we're happy to have you for sure. So I saw you all, I mean, like, this was kind of a groundswell movement, and you all as leaders in that movement of being able to do the hard things of leave everything that you know and love and travel across the country into places you've never been, into towns you've never seen, talking to people who sometimes want to talk to you and sometimes didn't. One of the things that I've been thinking about was like, wow, this is incredible, and I would love to do this. I know plenty of people that would love to do this, but it also takes a lot of privilege to do this, right? It takes a lot to be able to sell your home that you own, to homeschool your kids if they're at grade school age, to have enough savings to last a year for a family of 5. I mean, there's a lot that kind of goes into this ability to do this. And not to mention the ability of just a white person to come into a space and just kind of be and say, hey, I have some questions. I want to talk to you about some things. Things that myself, I couldn't go into anywhere in America and feel completely safe. So I'd love to hear from you kind of like, what do you think that experience was like? How your privilege kind of influenced your experience, as well as what should people do if they want to do something similar, if they want to have a similar experience, but don't have maybe some of the same resources?
Yeah, you know, I think the important thing to acknowledge from the get-go in response to that question, which I love that question because people don't ask that question a lot. And what you're saying about you going out and trying to do what we did, you would run into so many obstacles that we at the beginning would have never known existed. Yeah. So a big part of understanding the privilege to take the trip unfolded on the trip. We did not know that it was privilege itself that allowed us to go, that the systems around us had worked in our favor in such a way. And I think the word privilege is often weaponized and scares a lot of white people. One word that we found sort of is a little bit more, I guess, easy to understand is advantage, like advantages. All of the systems around us were creating advantage we were not aware we had. And so that was one of the hardest pieces of the journey, was discovering that the journey itself was, we had the advantage to take the journey. And, you know, that was a really hard thing to swallow. as we met people who said, you know, what you're doing, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't be able to show up in a city and start making phone calls and reaching out to people and have doors open for me the way they do for you. And at first I didn't believe that. I thought, well, anybody can make a phone call. Anyone can send an email. Anyone can set up a meeting. But we really began to see through the stories of the people we met that that is not true. And so my lived experience is completely centered on everything that's ever been true for me. Meanwhile, your lived experience is something I will never understand until you tell me, and I trust you enough to believe that that's true. Because even when you tell me, I still won't fully understand. There's a barrier there of experience. And this is where we're missing out, because we are not allowing ourselves into one another's experiences because we are so segregated and separated from one another by class, by, by gender, like all of these lines of demarcation that exist. People who live in the world we grew up in and come from don't understand that those lines are there. Or if they do understand they're there, they think they came by accident or by happenstance and not by design.
Yeah, and kind of to the second part of your question, I think about, what could people do? I think everyone has their own journey to take. I would not really recommend everybody to do what we did. Mm-hmm. Ours was a learning journey, and this is how we felt that we could best do that from the background we came from and what our hopes were for that. But I think the important thing is for everyone to embark on a journey, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's bridging divides in Charlottesville. Maybe it's folks from Crozet coming to, kind of the parts of the county and the city they've never seen before and beginning to learn about the history of their community. How were racial covenants and redlining played into making this place, kind of a segregated place. And there's a lot of great, researchers around that have done great work on that. But I think the important thing is not, emulating someone else's journey. Is to realize how each of us can step on a journey ourselves that looks unique to where our heart is, what our background is, and just to be open to wherever that journey may lead.
Wow, thank you for that. I mean, it's incredible. I think I saw a lot of journeys, right? Not just the physical driving, but the emotional journey that you all went on. And again, coming from the beginning, and you talked about it a bit with your friends afterwards and just kind of saying, we didn't know what we were going to come up against. We thought that there was going to be kind of a kumbaya experience, but it's funny that you say that because also Susan Bro had mentioned in her part of the story that that's not what we want, right? And so I think that's interesting to see both of those. And for Susan, I know it's incredible to see for you. I think maybe the beginning parts of the journey inside the story were more on the year afterwards, right? So I was here on August 11th and 12th. I know that that experience is something that it haunts every one of us, and it haunts every one of us in a different way. And you have one of the most haunting experiences and memories from that. And I think that to see that and to see the way that your voice has been shaped and has grown and has become just an amazing, necessary part of people's experience and their racial journey has been incredible for me to see. One of the questions that I had was, there was a moment where you had met with Erin and David, and they had invited you over to your house, and you had mentioned that you actually didn't want to come, and that it was something that you were uncomfortable with. Talk us through that moment. How did that come up for you?
I didn't know anything about them at first. So I thought, okay, let me read up on them. And then I read that they had been part of the political machinery that had been key in adding to the differences. And that's modus operandi for all political parties. I mean, that's not unique to Republicans or Democrats. That's the way politics have run as usual. And to actually encounter someone who had been part of that, I had a really hard time getting in there. Now I've chastised Ben because he edits out the long conversations we had afterward. But yeah, it was really hard. And I had to kind of talk myself through it. One, I trusted Ben. Two, I had heard some more about their story, and had reason to believe that they had, done things in good faith. They were not evil people that I was going to meet. And so I went into the situation, willing to see what was going to happen, but I was so fighting my own feelings. It was really hard to push through that. And I felt like I needed to say that. I mean, looking at it now, I don't know that I needed to say that, but it was what was boiling inside of me at the moment I said it. And they were gracious about it. I noticed though that in the film, Alfred Wilson, my co-founder, looks distinctly uncomfortable, like, oh Lord, what is she going to say? And his wife Fida starts fidgeting with her bracelet. David puts his arm around Erin, and I said at the time, I didn't know if it was to protect her or to keep her from coming after me. But we got through it. We were all rational adults, and there again was a difficult conversation, and we were fine thereafter. I think it's key that we all learn how to express our emotions rationally. We can express them, but we don't have to do this yelling past each other. We can say what's on our mind, say what's on our heart, and then sit still and listen to the other side. Sometimes the other side is completely irrational, and you have to acknowledge that and know when to walk away. But just this weekend, I had a difficult conversation with a fellow on Facebook about those Supreme Court appointments. And we each shared our side. We each kind of backed up what we were saying with facts and statistics and rational information. And we left feeling like we kind of agreed on a couple of points and agreed to disagree on some others. And that was a good feeling.
On Facebook, no less. Wow.
On Facebook, yeah. Which I know is still kind of old school, but on Twitter is particularly bad for people yelling past one another too. And in an election cycle, it's hard to maintain that. Post-election's probably going to be heated rhetoric as well. I mean, everybody needs to get over the notion that as soon as you have an election, everything's going to be hunky-dory. No, we still have to talk to one another and work through our differences. We have issues to deal with. We have conversations to have, but we can do them calmly, rationally, and backed with facts, not with pure raw emotion.
I just want to jump in real quick on Susan's response to that question, to say how much I admire her courage go into the hard conversation, where a lot of people would just hold on to that anger and that frustration and just sit through the lunch. Like Susan did the hard thing, which was to say, this is how I feel right now, and I need to process this. And that is the invitation we all have in those hard moments. And I know Ben always likes to point out, like, even people in this sphere of bridge building have those moments, those tense moments of disagreement or disconnect. And having the courage to press through it the way Susan did is a picture for all of us.
Her vulnerability really was so powerful in impacting our lives, and we just are so blessed to know her and to have our lives intersected.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, in the film, Susan, you say, don't be afraid to have difficult conversations. That's one of the main things Ben put in the film, is Susan, you saying, don't be afraid to have difficult conversations. So the fact that you've just told us about two of them shows you're walking your talk, which is an inspiration for all of us. Back to you. Well,
thank you. It's just so important to me that we have outcomes of solutions, outcomes of let's get beyond this and get to the other side. We don't need to hang on this cusp of high emotion. We need to get on with work. And you can't do that when people are afraid to talk to one another, or where they're deliberately harboring anger or fear or mistrust. You have to walk past those. You have to work past those. It's not comfortable. It's not easy, but it can be done.
Well, and I haven't been introduced yet, but I do want to also add that I think very important to that conversation was that Erin and David didn't get defensive in response to what Steven was saying. And I think that was critical in that situation, I think, resolving in a good place.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and kind of finalize this because I do want to hear more from Steven.
Yes.
But what Erin said is true. You know, this is really difficult work. I think there's a perception that this bridge building or transpartisan movement is, you know, feel good work, or that it's kumbaya, or that it's, you know, somehow sympathizing with the enemy. It's none of those things. It's incredibly difficult and challenging, and actually harder sometimes than hiding behind your keyboard or behind your anger. And so that's something that, you know, we thought about even with the messaging of this movement, why it's so difficult to cut through the clutter is that we're so fear-driven and fear-based from our programming of survival, that to try and talk about a message of looking within yourself for where you might be adding to division is much harder than just pointing at other people and saying they're the problem. And so the idea that you see, you know, people that are on this journey of overcoming our differences then have differences themselves was really important to show that this work is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's you're in the crucible. You're in this this period of transformation, which is tumultuous. And it's indicative of the journey that hopefully we all are going through or need to go through at some point if we're going to get beyond this, because it's unhealthy for us to carry around these feelings of hate and anger. It deteriorates us as individuals. So it's actually in your own best interest to work through them. Sorry.
That's okay. And I don't want to take away from Steven's time, because Steven has some awesome things to say. But very quickly, I want to say, and we're not talking about this culture of politeness where everybody just get along, everybody just be peaceful. That's not helpful either. I lost my earphone, hold on. But we have to, we can still have conversation without tone policing one another as well. Neither do we have to be vile about it. Okay, I'm gonna be quiet now.
Well, thank you for saying that. As soon as I heard it, like, man, there's got to be more to this story. And I'm so glad to get to talk to the people that put this together and the conversations that were had both before and afterwards. And even your decision, Ben, to include that part of the conversation near the end of the movie, where you would almost imagine that there is just kind of a ground swelling, big music, everyone is happy, we're all going to be doing this together. And then you're like, bam, it's still hard, you know? And so I appreciate that a lot. And I think that, like, Steven, I'm so excited to talk to you, because I'm just gonna throw out a hypothetical there, right? So let's say you have young, charming, well-spoken, glasses wearing, maybe, you know, a little bit of a mullet, maybe someone that was just so interested and so excited about politics and about getting through some of the, like, meeting through the partisanship and getting to the real solutions, recognizing that we as people, as human beings, just want to be treated like human beings. We want to have opportunities. We want to have experiences. We want the best for our families. And we have different ways of viewing how to get there. We have different medias that are telling us what is preventing us from getting there. What would you say to that person if they wanted to run for office, or if they were interested in kind of getting involved in the political process? How would you kind of use that experience? Just hypothetically, if there was someone that was like that, maybe on this call, who knows?
Thank you, Daniel. Are you about to announce your candidacy for office?
As a true politician, I'll wait, I'll hold on to that. I'm not going to deny, I'm not going to say I'm not running, but.
Wow, that's very exciting, and we look forward to following up with you on that. But to answer your question, I think one of the most common questions I get, well, whether it's among college students or young professionals, is I want to get involved in politics, but I don't want to get boxed in, or I don't want to get corrupted in a broken system. So what am I supposed to do? And that tracks with the data on millennials and Generation Z. We're the most independent generation in America. They, more than any other generation, don't want to affiliate with either political party. And so the focus really is on issues and not on party. So how do you create a career in public service and politics if you don't fit into the paradigm that exists? And so that's a really difficult question. And if you take that a step further, among Millennial Action Project's young legislators, we have about 1,500 young elected officials across the country who are mostly Democrats and Republicans. There are a handful of independents as well. I could tell you, just based on my private conversations with them, a whole number of them probably would be running as independents or in some other way to try and break out of this binary situation we have. So that to me is interesting. I'm curious to see how that gets resolved over the next 20 years or so. But in the meantime, I do think that you can be, as Greg Orman has said before, high-functioning Democrats and Republicans. I think you can find ways to be bridge builders within the two parties, and you see examples of that every single day. In fact, I think one of the big problems we have is when those examples do occur, they don't get enough oxygen in the media narrative. When we were talking earlier about a huge victory we had in Mississippi to change the state flag from a Confederate-based state flag to one that's emblematic and embracing of all of Mississippians. And that only happened because young leaders in the state were interested in building a bridge. They didn't believe in writing everyone off. They didn't want to demonize other people. They wanted to invite people in to create a multiracial, multi-religious, cross-partisan movement for change there. That's why they succeeded. I mean, if anyone knows Mississippi politics, you know Republicans have a supermajority. So if you're a Democrat who wants to move on this issue, like our co-chair down there did, you have to be willing to build an authentic bridge where you're moving people. And that's why, if you look at that bill, it didn't just pass with 50+1 votes where maybe they struck some deals behind the scenes and got that one person on board. That's not what happened. It was a transformative change where a vast majority of members of the House and the Senate supported it, and the Republican governor signed it into law. That's the kind of transformative change I believe our bridge building space believes in. And you can do that in the current party system while also advocating for more radical changes to how we govern in this country. So for young people who are maybe discouraged by the way our political system is oriented, I don't think the answer is to disengage and do something totally different. I think the answer is to be both idealistic and pragmatic at the same time, try and maximize the opportunities we do have.
And just to add on to what Steven was saying, because you spoke a lot about this during the midterms, that the 2018 midterms were the highest numbers of millennials elected to office. And because of the past 4 years, people on both sides of the political aisle have been activated, motivated, inspired to get into politics. I don't know if you can briefly talk about some of the numbers, but I found it quite impressive that you had predicted this kind of sea change that occurred in 2018.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the huge story coming out of 2018 is not only that you had the highest ever youth turnout for a midterm election, but you also had the most number of millennials and Generation Z getting elected to office. In Congress alone, there was a 420% increase of millennials in Congress. And that was not only Democrats, it was also Republicans. And most of those members joined our chapter in Congress called the Congressional Future Caucus, which is all about redefining issues as not left versus right, but future versus the past, to create these new coalitions to actually move legislation over the finish line. And so that's a major sea change that's happening right now. And the question that we're trying to answer is, as this next generation comes into political office, will we continue and exacerbate the trends of conflict being the dominant business model, of demonizing the other side so we can advance ourselves politically? Or will we turn that model on its head and say that cooperation is the new norm that we want to prevail and incentivize in the future? That's the big question that we're trying to answer. And obviously we hope that the next generation coming in will choose to focus on a politics of love and empathy, which I think is required in a diverse democracy like our own.
Absolutely.
And Steven, the final thing, sorry, Daniel, I didn't get to put in the film, but I think it's important to hear. Steven, can you walk us through the numbers of how big MAP is, how many states, how many members, and stuff like that?
Definitely, yes. So we have now 1,500 elected officials across all 50 states, as well as in Congress. And then we also set up these chapters, like I mentioned in Congress, we have the Congressional Future Caucus. We've also started those at in state legislatures as well. Really proud to share that this past week, we just hit our 30th state future caucus in the great state of Oklahoma. We have an amazing group down there. And we've been building these chapters for the past 4 or 5 years, and just an amazing milestone for this movement. And every year we bring them together. This year it was virtually, but usually in person at our Future Summit, to share the best ideas across the country and allow those to percolate to the top. And what's really magical about those moments is not only the diversity of the accents that you hear, which really is beautiful just to see and witness, but also how you usually can't even tell in these meetings who's a Democrat and who's a Republican. They just care about what works and what we can get over the finish line. So that to me is a very promising paradigm shift I'm seeing from this generation coming in right now.
That's great.
Daniel, I know you're the moderator, but can I ask you a question?
Oh, sure.
So when you're watching the film and you saw those remarkable scenes that Ben shot of Steven's work, you know, where there's these young legislators saying, I'm so-and-so, I'm a Democrat, I'm 32, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, Republican, clearly working together, clearly connected, clearly wanting to problem solve together. As a young person thinking about running for office, how did you feel? What did that do to you to see that kind of collaboration across party lines on the screen because of Steven's work and Ben's camera?
I mean, for me, it was a moment like I've never seen before, right? I've heard rumors, to be honest, about a past time in which Democrats and Republicans were working together in the Senate and the House, in which they were, people were able to cross party lines. And Joe Biden, he used to be this person that could talk to John McCain, and they were the best of friends, and they'd argue on the floor and then come back and have lunch together. And that is something that I haven't seen. I mean, in my entire political experience, I used to work in the Obama White House, and anything that I've done politically in campaigns, like I've never seen that. And so to see that there was, like, we're living during a moment in which there's a dearth in that, like there's not an opportunity, or at least I haven't seen it happening, but to see that there was also a groundswell of people that are working towards getting us back to that place, or getting us to a place in which people are leading with their hearts. People are able to communicate and agree or not agree, or just have different understandings, but coming from a basis of facts and coming from a basis of humanity. And I think that, like, that was, for me, it was an opportunity of, like, is this for real? Like, is this real life? Because this seems so far away from what I've seen and what we're constantly shown on TV. So I was, like, inspired by that, to think, like, wow, I'm not the only person that wants this. I'm not the only person that wants this opportunity for people to change and for people to work together once again. So I was inspired personally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the thought that comes to my mind as I listen to you, the thought that comes to my mind is, you know, Ben, Steven, if, you know, everybody in the Future Caucus in Congress and every one of those folks in the 30 state Future Caucuses, I think they should get an invitation to watch this film from Ben Rekhi or from the Virginia Film Festival or whoever the right sender is, because Steven, I don't know if you thought about it, but I think the film would be a shot in the arm for every one of those Future Caucuses, and would make them feel like, yeah, like they're on the right path, and give them the cinematic support that they deserve. Just a thought.
No, absolutely. And Ben is in touch with our team about exactly that. But one thing, Daniel, your point made me think about is how important archetypes are in politics for you, someone of certain identity groups, to feel like there's a path forward. So as you mentioned, when you hear bipartisanship, you do think of a John McCain or a Joe Biden. But where is the archetype of a young, diverse, dynamic bridge builder in our politics? That's not really there. And I think we have to create that archetype from scratch. And I think in the absence of that, we're going to see a lot of people who who go down paths that they might not want to because the path hasn't necessarily been created for them.
Daniel, I know you've been, sounds like you've kind of had the political route, somewhat similar to, I think, my upbringing. I get a lot of hope from what Steven and even more as the 1,500 or so people who have made a commitment to do this, because you and I both know probably that today's state representative is tomorrow's U.S. congressman, today's state senator is tomorrow's United States president. And turns, I think Barack Obama was a former state senator in Illinois. And so to me, that gives me such great hope that there is a growing groundswell that is moving through the system. And they're not in Congress today in large numbers, and they're not impacting Congress today in large numbers, but these folks in 15 years are going to be hopefully a large enough force and a powerful enough force that they can really begin to bring some change to Congress. Because, especially when in the Senate, when you have such small, razor sharp, razor thin margins of majority and minority, and in the House, that a group of 40 or 50 people in the House, or a group of 15 people who are really committed to this, can wield more power than anybody, because they can determine whether things are going to go. And so I'm encouraged by you, Daniel, and by what Steven's doing, and I really think that there's a lot of hope for our government system, because there are people in this system who have decided that right and left, and this war between right and left to destroy the other side is going to destroy the country unless we step in and lead.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, and that comes back to when you're thinking about running for politics. I mean, the questions are like, why me and why now, right? Like, what do I have to offer, and what do I have to bring to the table during this moment? And to see that there is a group of people that would be willing to support each other is just incredible. That you all have built this coalition, whether it is through your own experiences or through writing about things you've done, doing it since the Cold War. I mean, this is incredible to see. This is the moment, right, in which it needs to happen. I mean, there's going to be a breaking point in which we are able to see that we need to come together, and not in a way that seems, I mean, it's political and hacky, but like there's a way that it's genuine, right? There's a way that it's vulnerable and it's scary, and it comes with some prickliness, and it comes with some difficult times. But so we're talking about the future, right? We're talking about ways in which we can really work towards a better future. I'd love to just kind of have like a last question for you all. Where do we go from here, right? So I'm someone that's watched the videos. There's going to be millions of people, thankfully, willingly, right, that watch this video. What do you say to them going forward? How should we move forward together? What are some action steps or some things that they should be doing kind of coming out of this video?
I think number one is we have to stay informed and check your sources, get reliable information. I often tell journalists who are disheartened or discouraged, you have to stay as unbiased as possible. A democracy depends on an informed citizenry, and you have got to use your critical thinking skills. You've got to educate yourself, take some time, and get the facts. You just have to.
Absolutely. Erin and David?
What I would say is just almost like a motto or a mantra is that there's always more. And this idea that you're woke, which is, there's almost like a race to be woke. And if you wake up every day thinking, well, I'm woke, then it's almost like you're not inviting the more that someone else carries so that you can learn and grow. Like, you're closing yourself off to the possibility that there's something you don't know yet. And so if you have something to teach me, Daniel, and I have decided I've arrived, then I'm not going to learn from you. And so I think it's really important to wake up and say, every day there's more. There's always more. And if I am where I am today on my journey, tomorrow, whoever I interact with today is going to give me pieces of my own story that I'm currently missing in order to move forward. And it also opens us up and expands our hearts to lead, because we're beginning to understand that we are one little piece of a much larger picture, a much larger story that we're all a part of. And so that's one thing that gives me hope, and it's one thing that I'm trying to live by.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think for a lot of folks, it's okay to start small. It's okay to start in your own family, in your own street, in your own neighborhood, in your kid's school, whatever that is, to begin this journey. And I think one of the requirements for this journey is curiosity and humility, is to realize that you may not know everything that's going on in our country, is that your lived experience, your worldview is true and correct, but there are other ones that also exist at the same time. And if you want to understand how to get to the bottom of what is causing so much division right now, you have to step into this journey with curiosity. That's so much. And then speaking of films, and this being a film festival, Erin and I watched The Social Dilemma a couple nights ago, and that absolutely has like destroyed a lot of paradigms I have about that role. And so I think another recommendation, it's easy to go watch that film after you watch this film, of course. But to see the role that this social media system is having, and so what can you do as a citizen in the midst of this ecosystem that has very different goals than many of us do?
Yeah.
Well, I want to build on what both Susan and the Leaverton said, because David used the word curious, and Susan, you talked about learning, and Erin, you talked about more. And that's what I want to say. You know, we get this election right around the corner, staring us in the face. And I'm sure there are a lot of folks listening here who are Democrats or who are Republicans, and who are thinking, well, what do they want me to do? I have to vote Democrat or I have to vote Republican. And I would say, go ahead and vote. But that phrase that one of us attributed to Greg Orman, high functioning, be a high functioning citizen, be a high functioning Democrat or Republican. And for me, that means curious, collaborative, and innovative. You know, be curious, learn more, be collaborative, and recognize there are people who are voting different than you, who are good people, and you ought to get to know them. And then innovative, because to me, that's the key, is that we can't go back to the past to figure out how to deal with, you know, the social media. We can't go back to the past to figure out how to deal with nuclear weapons or climate change or fires in California or rising sea levels. We can't go back to the past. And Daniel, I see you nodding your head because your generation knows these are new problems. And the idea that the founding fathers can guide us, sure, that the Constitution is valuable, but the Constitution can't. We have to be the founding fathers and mothers. We have to be the refounding fathers and mothers. And I think that's what the bridging movement's about. It's saying, don't come back to us with these stale liberal and conservative answers. They are not working. They are not working. We've got to be innovators and creators. So, Steven.
Well, Susan's answer earlier inspired me to share something that Martin Luther King Jr.'s oldest son shared with me. And it's 6 steps to creating real progress and change. And he said, 1, educate yourself. 2, educate your community. 3, strategize. 4, negotiate. 5, direct action. And 6, reconciliation. And he says a lot of people miss the reconciliation. But I think those 6 steps are a helpful guide for all of us. And sometimes certain groups only pick and choose certain parts of that. And each issue, of course, is different. But I do think that, you know, all of these expressions of democracy, whether it is direct action and peaceful protest, or whether it is negotiation and reconciliation, these are all expressions of American democracy. But each of those expressions need to be, you know, rooted in our common humanity, and should be rooted in the love that we have for each other. And I think that was something profound that he shared with me, and just wanted to share that with all of you.
I guess I'll just jump in here at the end. You know, this will be playing at the end of October, just a couple of weeks before the election, and a lot of people are scared, and you know that there's going to be more violence, and there's going to be more unrest, and there's unknowns and uncharted territory we're going to be in with how the voting process will go, and mail-in ballots, and you know, just people declaring they won, they didn't, and it's going to be, it will be a messy time. But I am firmly in the camp that we will get through this, and that it's up to each of us in order to get through it. There are agendas that a news media channel has that are different from us in order to promote an angle, and it's usually to sell advertising. There's an agenda that politicians have, which is to win elections, and they're not aligned with our agenda, which is to move forward together as a country. And so it might get worse before it gets better, but at the same time, that's why it's what we can do in our own lives that really will have a cumulative effect. And people a lot of times feel powerless and hopeless, like I can't control what the system is broken and not functioning and divisive, but you can control how you talk to your friends, what you post online, what you say to your family members. And so maybe when you go into a Thanksgiving dinner, the goal shouldn't be to win an argument or to change someone's mind. It should just be to hear where they're coming from and agree to disagree. And I guess I'm most inspired by the public and the Americans that we've met making this film, that we all have a role to play in reuniting the country. And if we keep focusing on this 1,000 or so elected officials that are locked in this, death battle, and we're ignoring the 330 million of us that are out there, the majority of whom want to move past this division, and the data backs that up. So there may be some unrest in the streets, but the millions and hundreds of millions of us that don't want that to happen are what will keep this country together. And so I just thank Mark and everyone on this call, because I really feel this movement is in its nascency, and these ideas will become more mainstream over the next 5 to 10 years, because we're at this crossroads where things can turn around and get worse, or they can turn around and get much, much better. And it's up to each of us to take agency over that.
Wow, you summed it up better than I could. So I just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you all for creating this documentary, for living your lives and sharing that life adventure with us. It was truly inspiring to watch, and I'm excited just to see where this is going to go from here. I know this is a part of the journey for so many people, and I know that as we share this experience with more people, that they're going to then kind of catch that bug, catch that fever of inclusivity, of bipartisanship, of equity, and how that will move our country forward in a positive way that is understandable and that is agreeable and that's beneficial for everyone. So I'm so excited to just hear from you all, to talk to you, to see how this is going to move forward. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and thank you all for participating in the 33rd Annual Virginia Film Festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dude, thanks, everyone. And Daniel, keep us posted on your political career. We're all watching now. All right,
absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.